First and foremost, I want to introduce judges from left, Shaw, Matsunaga, Peter, Yonaga-san, BB-san, Fujimayu, Arashun-san, Eriko, Koki-san. So, on the motion, this has to introduce immediate democracy. I call the Prime Minister to open your case. Here. 入りません。
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time I'm standing at the grand finals of Japan VP, and never have I been prouder to stand when opening government. We think on our side of the house that democracy is a system which allows citizens to govern themselves, and at the end of the day, immediate democracy allows for better governments by the citizens, and that's what we're proud to propose. I'm going to do 4 things for you, I'm Prime Minister. I'm firstly going to give you my model, I'm secondly going to give you what it means to live in a democracy, and why we think immediate democracy is a better representation of what democracy looks like. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about why and how this makes policy more responsive, and how that leads to better policy making in the long run. What is our model? Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, basically we're talking about liberal democracies, we're talking about the legislative body like the House of Commons, the lower house in the Diet, House of Representatives, House of Lords, etc. All these legislative bodies are going to be elected with immediate democracy from now on. What does that actually mean? It means, number one, that each citizen is given the ability to change their political affiliation at any given time, and there will be a system by which these votes will be calculated, and when that proportion is changed, then so too will the proportion of the legislature be changed. It's effectively like a proportionate representative system with one electoral district, except that elections are happening all the time. That's the kind of system that we want on our side of the model. It's not our burden to prove to you that this will actually be possible, because we think, we don't want to go down that road. So secondly, like when the proportion changes, the seat will also reflect that. Okay, so that's what we want to go for on our side of the house. Firstly, what does it mean to live in a democracy? Now, basically, ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world with an indirect democratic system. What does that mean? Well, ideally, we want to be able to state our own voices in legislature, right? So if it's Japan, we want, as 1.2 billion people living in Japan, to be able to voice our own voices. But that doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen, because we all have lives to lead, and we all have different things to do, and some of us can't voice it as well as others. That's why we delegate responsibility to 480 people. No, thank you. And these people are the politicians in the lower house, or maybe the 204, that's it, 200 people, I can't remember how many, in the upper house, ladies and gentlemen. And that's the indirect democracy that we want to live in. Now, basically, because we want to ideally be able to state our own opinions, it's obviously possible, and it's obviously extremely likely, that our opinions change at any given moment with any random event. And it's good that these events and these opinions are periodically picked up every 4 years by the system of elections. But at the same time, we think it's even better that citizens can directly and more frequently voice their opinions that reflects their changing preferences. Why? Because democracy is fundamentally about giving people, no thank you, the right to govern themselves. But in between elections, the way in which they are able to influence policy is extremely limited. I give you the example of things like protests, Occupy Wall Street, for example, or opinion polls where 90% of the population support background checks. But these are indirect methods in that the politicians are not legally bound to necessarily follow the results of protests, because they are not directly do not directly affect the legislative body in question. We think that the ability to be able to voice your opinions on a more frequent basis leads to a better representation, in the sense that it strengthens the concept of indirect democracy, ladies and gentlemen, in that you are able to voice your opinions more directly in the way that this legislature is governed, because that's more, no thank you. And that's what we think on our side of the house. Secondly, let's look at why it makes policy more responsive. Number one, we tell you in the status quo that you are accountable, that politicians at the end of the day are only accountable once every 4 years or once every 6 years. And we think that there are tangible harms that are related to the fact that you are only accountable for a very brief amount of time. Why is that? For example, we think on our side of the house that spontaneous events actually changed perceptions and actually should be reflected in policy, that are not correctly picked up under the status quo because we only have elections once every 4 years. I'm going to give you 2 examples. The first is the Occupy Wall Street movement, where a lot of people gathered in the state of New York and in Washington to try, in Wall Street actually, to try and protest about regulating big banks, but the politicians did absolutely nothing. And then by the time when when the 2010 midterm elections came along, the debate was about Obamacare. Occupy Wall Street's ideas to regulate big banks went unheard, went unrecognized, and it died down. And we lost the ability to be able to regulate big banks on that moment in time. The second point we give you is the Sandy Hook shootings in Newton, New York, when which 90% of the American population decided to support background checks for gun owners, but this voice was also neglected, ladies and gentlemen. This voice was also neglected, and the 2012 elections, the 2010 midterms, again, became something about Obamacare. It became totally different, and the result of the issues being confused, because the issues get left behind, ladies and gentlemen, they tend to erode in importance over time, and the immediate policy responses are not done, necessary legislature is not conducted, and we think that it's extremely harmful, because in legislature, that's how we want ourselves to be governed. Law is a framework by which we decide what we want to do and what we don't want to do, what we can do and what we can't do, and we think that these should be accurately reflected, and that's the problem we see in the current situation.
So how is an opinion, in the absence of time and opportunity for consideration, actual accountability?
What? I don't get that. In the sense that you are more like, look, let's take a look at this accountability issue. Politicians are accountable in that they should be representing the voice of the citizens. I've already told you about that's what that they should be doing in the concept of indirect democracy. If they are being more responsive, and if they get kicked out as a result, that's being more accountable than being accountable every 4 years, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know where that's coming from. So thirdly, how does this actually change our ideals? Well, firstly, we think it allows politicians and policies to be more responsive to the opinions that come out in the daily lives of our citizens. Politicians risk being de-seated immediately, and therefore they are more susceptible to the voices of the population. They are more susceptible and responsive to the voices of the population. Secondly, we say that this makes lobbying extremely difficult, ladies and gentlemen, because the seats in the legislature, the people who occupy the legislature are now so fluid, the lobbyists don't know where to lobby, ladies and gentlemen. And precisely because of that reason, it becomes difficult for gun lobbies like the NRA to be able to effectively lobby people in the legislature. It becomes difficult for people like big banks and big pharma to be able to actively lobby certain Republicans, ladies and gentlemen, because they always change as a result of taking our model and the policies and the people being more responsive on a daily basis. We think that this, therefore, at the end of the day, allows better policies to come out in the sense that, like, if you have a spontaneous amount of people wanting background checks, that will now happen. Those will now become laws. If a spontaneous massive amount of political traction is gathered on regulating big banks, that will now be possible. And that's how people should be governed, ladies and gentlemen. That is our ideal version of democracy. What has Opening Proposition told you in today's debate? We've told you that democracy is a system of governance, and it has to be responsive as much as possible to the citizens' preferences. Immediate democracy allows you to do that. We've also told you how policies like the citizens actually do want become neglected due to the fact that elections have time lag, and it doesn't really work. And for all these reasons, to protect democracy, we've never been prouder to propose.
Thank you very much. Now I invite Leader of Opposition.
Speaker, it is Nick's first time to debate in the grand final, and it is my 5th time to debate. I that this time the opening opposition is going to take today's debate, and there's 3 reasons why. There are 3 argumentations that I would like to make to prove why. First of all, how this policy undermines stable politics and why we think that's harmful. Second of all, the importance of having a periodic election. And thirdly, the impact of this policy to the minority. Before that, a number of responses to make to Nick. First of all, in terms of the necessity, in an emergency case, we need quick responses. We're more than happy to have things such as emergency referendum. We don't think that's really that can't happen under the policy of the status quo. More importantly, he talked about how it's important to increase the number of cases in which people can influence politics. But he also accepts that there's things such as indirect method of influencing politics. But he didn't really analyze why indirect method is not enough. We think that in these kind of indirect methods, such as demonstrations or appealing to conducting those kind of things, can oftentimes work very effectively. For example, like if you have a very low popularity rate, that means that that administration or that political party, the probability of that political party winning the next election would probably decrease. They care about the popularity rate, therefore they have an incentive to respond to these decreasing popularity rates. When it comes to demonstration, obviously demonstration works. For example, the Million March in Washington, when it happened during the Civil Rights Movement, obviously impacted severely when it comes to how the Lyndon B administration deals with civil rights. Sit down. Now, moreover, he talked about how politicians will necessarily become more responsive to citizens' voice. Now, there's another word for that. It's called populism, right? We don't think that being responsiveness automatically means good policy. I'm going to further extend this issue in my argumentation. So first of all, how this policy undermines stable politics. We think that having a stable political administration is a very important thing for society. The reason why that is the case is because it allows people, organizations, companies, countries to make long-term prediction about their government and plan based on their government policy. For example, if corporate tax is going to be increased, corporation expects that since it's the same administration will probably continue for the next 3 to 4 years, it can make business decisions or business planning based on that fixed situation. Sit down. When nations conclude diplomatic treaties, they can expect that that treaty would be upheld for at least as long as that administration would continue. This policy makes it difficult for organizations, people, countries to make that long-term expectation because support percentage or popularity rate can be very dynamic and can be very volatile at sometimes because popularity or citizens' popularity can be easily influenced by things such as sensationalist reporting of government failure, the scandals of particular politicians, like whether they know a particular kanji or not, like policy which is extremely unpopular, such as policies which would increase consumption tax and those kind of things. So if you take this policy, you will not be able to have a stable or at least a long administration compared with the status quo. We accept to a certain degree that they will remain stable, but compared to the status quo, it will not. And this is harmful. Sit down. First of all, because it makes it difficult for people to make that long-term expectation and planning ahead. For example, economical decision. Corporation will be able to be very difficult for them to expect whether the consumption tax would remain 10% or whether it will decrease or whether it will increase, severely undermining their business planning. But second of all, it will be very difficult for other nations and countries to conclude very important diplomatic deals such as economic treaty. Sit down because they don't have a strong guarantee that that administration will continue and this treaty would be upheld. Not yet. Second, the importance of having a periodic election. We think that having a periodic election, such as one election every 4 years, is very important. The first reason why that is the case is because a certain fixed time of election enables people, not yet, to focus their attention, to think about politics. To tell you the truth, most people don't have enough time or they don't have effort to think about politics every day. They have to think about their family, they have to think about their living and their job, ladies and gentlemen. So they cannot focus all of their attention to politics every day. But second of all, it allows better evaluation of political policy, right? Because certain evaluation of policy, such as increasing tax consumption tax or austerity, necessarily takes a long time for the result to actually appear to the society. So it takes a long time for us. It requires a long time for that policy to remain in order for citizens to be able to properly evaluate whether austerity or increasing consumption was good or not. Not yet. If we take this policy, 2 things are going to happen. First of all, it is going to dramatically increase political apathy. The reason why that is the case is because people won't be able to maintain their focus or attention. If they have to think about political decisions every day, ladies and gentlemen, they're less likely to make correct decisions because of this political apathy. But second of all, it undermines people's ability to evaluate political policies correctly because they have to make this evaluation every day, even though policies such as austerity, policies such as taxation requires a long term to evaluate. As a consequence of that, people would make incorrect decisions when it comes to policy decision.
Okay, the reason why there's political apathy in the status quo is, even though citizens are interested in politics at a certain point in time, they can't reflect that voice until 3 years later. If they have the gratitude and the satisfaction of knowing that their voices will be directly reflected immediately, don't you think political apathy would not exist?
It is true that they cannot directly influence the politics, but as you can see, there are indirect but at the same time effective ways in influencing politics. You have to explain why these indirect methods are completely incapable of influencing politics. Final issue, impact on the minority. Now, under the status quo, since the voices of minorities are at least being reflected to the diet to a certain degree, obviously the reason why that is the case is because we have systems such as proportional representation system. So even you are part of a minority, we have systems to bring that voice up to the diet and decide policies based on that situation. But if we take this policy, the number of seats is necessarily going to be proportionate to the number of population supporting that particular political organization, making it very difficult for minorities to be able to reflect their voice, because inherently the number of people of minority is small. Therefore, the number of seats that they can get in the diet is going to be less compared to the status quo. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why this policy is going to fall is for three reasons. First of all, because it undermines stable political administration and stable governance. Second of all, because it undermines people's ability to make long-term predictions. And third of all, because it harms minorities. So motion falls.
Now I call up Deputy Prime Minister.
That doesn't mean that it's short sighted. They don't want it so just because it's immediate gratification, it doesn't necessarily mean it's short sighted.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Chair, we agree from our side of the House that stability to an extent is important. But the question is, what is the most important factor in a democracy? From our side of the House, we think that responsiveness and reflection and reflecting and representing the people that exist in your community and the people that you represent is the first and foremost fundamental role that a democracy has to try and achieve. Stability and volatileness, all that kind of thing, comes below that, and they are still yet to tell us why stability is something of paramount importance. From our side of the House, we told you right from the very beginning in Nick's speech what democracy is, what are the core fundamental things of democracy, and why democracy in itself needs to be representative, and how indirect democracies, or even if it's immediate democracies, the fundamental core value that exists within the term democracy is representation. And that's why from our side of the House, that's what we push for, and that's what we think we still are winning the debate from winning him his first ever JVP tournament. So, a couple of responses before moving on to new material. Firstly, they told us that stability is going to be lost under our side. We don't think so. We think that maybe on comparison, to an extent, maybe it will go down, and that's something we're not going to disagree upon. But the extent of that volatileness and the extent of that stability going down, we don't think it's going to be problematic to the extent that they tell you. Because if something is volatile, and if something, look, let me test it the other way around. If people want something to happen, people don't want it to happen simply for the next day or simply for the next 2 days. Take point in case being the Sandy Hook shooting and people wanting background checks for guns to happen. They didn't want it just for that year. They did not want it just for the next week, right? They want it to happen, and they want that policy to stay in place for a long period of time. Therefore, even under our scenario, if people want these things, they probably want it for a couple of years or decades, and even more so, right? These people are not short-sighted, so the volatility won't even happen. But even if it becomes volatile, the reason why it becomes volatile is because you have two opinions in the first place, which means that you can assume a scenario where the volatility will swing back and forth, meaning the laws and all the reflections of that will swing back and forth as well. Therefore, you will, at the end of the day, reach stability when you come to the middle ground. But we don't necessarily think stability goes down to the extent they see it as a problem, even under our scenario. Secondly, they told us that periodic elections are important. And we don't think so. But the reason why they said is because these are the only instances where you focus about politics, when people think about politics. If that is the case, why do we even have demonstrations? Why did we even have the Wall Street demonstrations, which wasn't even at the time of elections in the first place, right? As Kowa already told you, not responded at all by that side, right? These things, and people think about politics when spontaneous events happen, when events happen that make them think about politics, and it's not the other way around. It's not that people think about politics only when elections happen, but rather events happen making people think about politics. The question then becomes, what do you want to do with that people's thought, or the people's thought that comes from the reaction that that comes to these spontaneous events. On the our side of the house, we want that to be reflected. We think those voices are important, and most of all, we think that voices of reaction to events is the most important type of voice that you can get in any kind of scenario. We think that on the our side, we want to reflect that because we're talking about democracy, representing the people. On the their side, they're forced to wait for 2 years, 3 years, by which point people have forgotten about it, or even if they haven't forgotten, the debate regarding the elections has turned to something different. So even if people want to talk about the Sandy Hook shootings, it's all about Obamacare, and there is no way that they can influence what's happening on that political ground. Therefore, that's the reason why political activity happens in the first place in the status quo, as Kowa told you in his POI, again, not adequately responded to by the Southern House. Therefore, even if you were to assume that best case scenario in state political activity might happen under their logic to a certain extent on the other side, the comparison is this. On the other side, we still get to make sure that those voices are reflected within politics. On the our side, maybe it may be volatile, but still they get reflected. On their side, they get forgotten about. Even if people want that not to be forgotten, they still end up being forgotten. We don't think that's democracy under their scenario. But finally about minorities, right? Let's be honest. Minorities and the problems of minorities is not a unique problem of immediate democracy. It is a problem of democracy itself. And even under that scenario, minorities are going to suffer. It's the tyranny of democracy, and that's something that we're not willing to defend because it happens under that side as well. And it's not a unique cause for them to say that immediate democracy in itself is better, it's worse. Yeah.
But in your paradigm, people going to debate about Sandy Hook one day, Syria next day, and austerity the next day. How can we have meaningful, long-term, productive discussions about these very important factors?
Because discussions can, go on for a couple of days, and people can have various discussions at the same time. Also, but moreover, the question is this: on your side, you tell us that demonstrations can work effectively. How did Wall Street turn out? How did Sandy Hook and demonstrations regarding that turn out? They were forgotten, right? And that's the thing we do not want to happen. And even though, it's a comparison, right? We still think that even if our solution isn't perfect, and we're not saying it's perfect, the solution is comparatively a lot better on the our side, and that's something you still have to defeat using Mitsushi and his rhetoric, right? Next, it's true. Next, the theory argument, right? Moving on, adding a bit on to Kowa's final argument about lobbying and how lobbying becomes harder. Something, again, they neglected. We think that the lobbying becomes much harder, and the influence of that policies get from lobbyists, from the powerful people with money, gets decreased under our scenario. Firstly, because as Kowa told you, lobbyists don't know who are the people making the decisions because we make that fluid under our scenario. But secondly, that makes a scenario where it becomes harder to create connections within these democracies, within the political sphere as well. And getting rid of that connection makes a scenario where the policies are much more reflective and much more responsive to what the citizens on the ground want and what they are wanting and what they are needing on our scenario. But the final argument I'm going to bring to you is about how it better represents minor parties within these democracies. We're talking about the Lib Dems in the UK or the Kowa in Japan, right? The status quo is this: because they want a large coalition, as large as possible, they have to create and they have to follow certain election strategies. They have to focus on certain districts, neglecting other districts, or they have to focus on certain areas within the country, and they don't have the capacity to go for all the districts. And therefore, for the districts that are not included in these election strategies, well, the people within these districts are void of a certain option that they should have, but they do not have, simply because we have that election strategy, and the election strategy doesn't include the area. I think that this is depriving a very important choice for these individuals who should have the right to be represented by that party, but just because of that system and the system of election strategy, these people are neglected. Under our scenario, you don't have to worry about that because there's a direct representation, and you're being chosen, and you have the ability to choose. And for all those reasons, we think that we won it. Is first one.
Now I call up Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. This is my fourth time grand final. I'm going to examine 3 questions in debate. Number 1, does this proposal really lead to quick representation in order to solve a social problem? Number 2, impact over the lobbying activities. Number 3, how this proposal exacerbates elitism with regards to the interests of the minority. So let's move on to the first question. Does this really guarantee quick representation of interests of a public in order to deal with specific social problems? 4 counter-analysis. Number 1, they say, when people get interested in political issues, they want to exercise that next step. When 3 years later on, then people will forget. If people really forget, that mustn't be really serious and important issue for the public. For example, there are so many important issues with lasting discussion, such as the ISIS, death penalty, or tax disputes, or gay marriage, or abortion. There are so many social issues that people never forget just because there are specific periods until the next election. Therefore, if people just suddenly forget, that must be a serious issue in the first place. But more than that, he said about the district problem, right? If the politicians are really talented, they really have ability, so that citizens really want. That kind of politicians are elected anyway under their side of the house and our side of the house. Therefore, the problem about the potential loss of human resources are not mutually exclusive with this particular proposal. No, thank you. But secondly, they say represent direct and constant representation of public will is important. But even under their side of the house, one ruling political party reached one conclusion and one legislation. I don't believe, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, they can fully or sufficiently represent every single people's interest and opinion. That's why the conception of congregation exists in our society. We have a manifesto, we have a party, or existence of a party shows that congregation is much efficient in order to generalize public will. We cannot cater to every single political predilection or ideological preference of every single voter. That's exactly why we need to congregate that. We need to summarize that, and we need to generalize that into one specific manifesto. That is exactly what we have at the election model, rather than this immediate democracy model. No, thank you. I'll respond to that later. Number 3, the Occupy Wall Street movement will be fantastically solved under their side of the house. No, this is opposite. The representation of majoritarian civilians' will at a random point in time, because those people's priority are not necessarily Occupy Wall Street movement. They have different priorities. Therefore, representation of random majoritarian will does not necessarily lead to or conclude specific legislation to increase the minimum wage of workers at specific geographical places in other towns. Therefore, that solvency is fundamentally dubious. No, thank you. Number 4, even if they can perfectly guarantee flexible representation of public will on the spot, that's dangerous, Mr. Speaker, because that undermines the consistency of so many areas of legislation, especially economic policy and diplomatic policy, which requires very hard consistency. No, thank you. Because people are oftentimes very emotional or visceral reactions rather than making rational decisions. That's exactly why when terrorism happened in Paris by ISIS, when terrorism happened in 9/11 in New York, many people made huge aggressions and supported aggressive political parties and candidates. That's how Bush was elected as a result of 9/11. The discourse is hijacked and monopolized by this kind of demagogic emotional approach, which is very dangerous, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, because diplomatic stance becomes very inconsistent when floating people's opinions are constantly exposed and represented into legislation. We have long-term strategy to consider about how to engage with Gaza, how to engage with ISIS, with very confidential, confidential intelligence strategies. It's so dangerous to quick and up and go down, and make that sort of diplomatic decisions. No, thank you. But however, Mr. Speaker, the periodical elections gives the time to calm down so that people are able to make a better utilitarian calculations. Even on the other side of the house, politicians have some incentive to cater to people's opinions in order to win the elections, Mr. Speaker. But the difference is this periodicality of a time for people to consume information makes policies or regime more stable. I'll close it, sorry.
So if you agree with the fact that there's so many issues in the world, why can you allow the politician to dominate which agenda to be discussed in the parliament because there's only one in 4 years?
No, if the issues, that sort of issues are really important, the politicians have ability or incentive or motivation to pick and choose those issues in order to get votes from that particular groups who are interested in that particular problem. That's exactly what is
even on our side of the house of electoral model, the minorities party exists because there are some politicians or many politicians that have the incentive and ability to represent the interests of minorities or the diverse kinds of issues on our side of the house. We are not sure how on your side of the house those multi-dimensional issues are suddenly considered into the political and legislative sphere and actually makes any consequence of that. No, thank you. How about lobbying activities? Two rebuttals or two counter-analysis for that. Number one, under our electoral models, the lobbying and the counter-lobbying of weak groups are possible because electoral competition is short or like just within the electoral terms, right? Therefore, even labor unions or those small and weak interest groups are able to make a reasonable amount of donation to political parties. But under their side of the house, those lobbying battles occurs every day and every now and then. Therefore, the interest group with very strong financial capability are only able to make huge PR or advertisements to get attention from the voters. Therefore, that sort of constancy of lobbying battle will exacerbate elitism, exacerbate or aggrandizes the financial and political disparity between the rich and poor, or Republicans and Labour parties. That fundamentally undermines their representation of vulnerable individuals. Finally, about how the impacts of the elitism in Mississippi and with regards to the apathy problem that Yuki explained. Mississippi, not everyone has equal access to political resources. Not everyone is able to participate in political discourses or comprehend the articles or read newspapers every day or accessing consuming information about politics. Rich and intelligent people like them are able to do so. But what about poor people who have less access to tertiary education, less literacy or ability to consume or understand or comprehend the difficult information? For those people, the number of seats is up and down every day constantly. They have no idea about what is going on behind the scene in the political sphere. As a result of which, these people will surely lose the interest in the politics in the first place. They will stop or refuse to participate in politics. These minorities or uneducated poor people will be fundamentally politically abandoned from society. That leads to less financial support, less welfare system for these individuals. Therefore, we are happy to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I call upon member of government.
As a younger team with a broad futures over debate societies, we believe we are certainly the possibility to lead to the dictatorship will first minimize. However, the Mitsushi says the politicians actively should choose their policy should be discussed. However, there is a more possibility to lead the dictatorship, meaning that politicians arbitrarily control what discussion is necessary or what issues isn't necessary. They always talk about the necessity of these motions is about time spans. However, our side explained why the time span is necessary to avoid controlling agendas we should discuss in a parliament. They are almost, and more importantly, the all assumptions is that the public is a very stupid person even after these motions. However, we are denied this path. For this reason, we beg to support these motions. Three things talking about. First is the vital principles of democracy. Secondly, I explained to you how politicians can control their control the agendas we should talking about. Thirdly, I explained you political maturity increase more in my parlance. Before that, independent rebuttal. They explained you they disturb long-term policies about the diplomacy and so forth. However, it's not true. Why that's so? Even if, regardless of what kind of regime they control in the politics, of course, the democratic diplomacy strategy is one-liners because there's such diplomacy strategy is actually such a historical concept or historical histories and so forth. So not so much changing happens. So secondly, their assumption is that a much because you have to more carefully consider what is the true voting or what is the true feelings about such policies. And moving on to first issue toward the principles. We think that which agenda should discuss, it should be after such the voter itself, not after politicians. Because there's such the among the many policies, they have to think about what policies have a many nuance about these policies. They're changing in a daily basis, changing such their discussion levels and so forth. So we have to reflect such the things. The thing is, there's in the current systems more possibility to control controlled by the politicians. Why is that so? Simply because under the status quo, the elections, the dominated hottest issues, they are making by such politicians. Now, why politicians have arbitrary controls? Because it means that they want to discuss populistic policies during elections. They hide the controversial issues and so forth. Why that's two reasons. First is that for the politicians, it's easy to gain the vote and gain the support from the public because they, of course, such a populist, it's a very populistic. Then secondly is that they're easy to parse away the controversial policies because their attentions is now attracted in their such that the other perspective, especially is a very populistic issues. Maybe the options I try to point it said even if supporters said, and some people pointed out it's such a biased discussions. However, it's not also it's problematic. It's because there are many attentions that focus on such a hottest issues released by such a government. Because of course there's also because there's such a media also have time limitation to broadcast. So if you try to explain or discuss in easy ways, the easy words, so this time is so limited. So the media try to correct such a very hottest issues and so forth. There. Actually, under the status quo, in Japan's Abe regimes, what do you, such Abe-san, do it? Is that there is Abe-san appealed to such Abenomics is a very populistic policies. Of course, it's a very stimulate such economics. Of course, everyone uploads such policies. And then Abe-san tried to upload and try to attract such attention in these policies. And then we didn't talk about such a collective self-defense policies and so forth. The problem is after the ending such Abenomics, the policies, they suddenly come up appear such a collective defense policies suddenly appears and they try to possibly pass such policies. Then maybe Uchiyama-san said the emergency referendums still exist. However, when you hold such the emergency referendums is after such the dominated politicians. When of course decided by such politicians already dominated. So there is such possibly control or arbitrary control exists.
Politicians and political party. You're still going to have those on your policy.
We are compared. Of course, we are compared it. The thing is there's time span. If you need the time span, of course you are many times to change such ideas. So after taking the more exclusive reflected because they're when both the drastic changes is that when the policies appear in the politics. So if you appear such a political discussions, so you can devote such policies. So easy to more inclusively reflect such opinions. Thirdly, how political maturity increase. Under status quo, election time is so limited, it's problematic. Of course, it's limited times. So if you are received, you do not consider so much, and you cannot correct information so much. is not so much incentive to be active because they have big possibility salary changing. So they have somehow they deeply consider about it. Mr. Speakers, we have to avoid such dictatorship. And as a younger generations, we are very proud to.
Thank you for your remarks. Now I call upon member of opposition.
I'm going to have two key points of discussion. Firstly, how this policy change the target of accountability by the politician. This policy would change the target of accountability not to the people, but to the political party in order to say their political position on our side of the political, exclusively explained by the better system of this immediate democracy. Second, I'm going to talk about at least the democracy will slow down on their side of the house. In order to counter the ultimate goal of side proposition to say immediate and reflection of the voices whatsoever. So before moving to extension, so I have to make a mere crucial response to the entire government bench. So they seems to assume that as long as people dissatisfied with something issue or they're in having changing political stances via internet, those sort of things, politicians are able to react and initiate the discourse in a way that people want. But the real thing is, politicians need to understand the kind of issue in which they are engaging on that issue. For example, like talking about maybe environmental issue. Politicians have to understand what is the debate really about, how to make a nuanced discourse with regards to how the problem to make that argument into a law procedure, those sort of things. So in order for politicians to make a positive discussion on the agenda, they need a preparation time in order before making argumentation, so that the kind of quick accountability or the smooth transition on a politician to react to that kind of agenda is meaningless, as well as not necessarily realistic as characterization of the politician. And therefore, with this response, I can no thank you negate the kind of many mechanisms as to how this policy are able to make and change without make politicians really accountable to the need of the citizens to begin with. And also, this policy is not this policy do not necessarily dictate or lead the choice of the political discourse within parliament, and therefore the kind of extension from member of government seems irrelevant. So firstly about the changes to the target accountability of the politician. So politician will be accountable to the party, not to the people, in the contrast to the status quo, which may be counterintuitive. It is really true in today's debate with regards to the very analysis of the system that in which they have to implement by this policy. So individual politicians do not have to take care the ability to give a persuasive argument to make as responsible politician to the people, because when proportional representative system is introduced to distribute the seats from the political party under this policy, the kind of and when those sort of seats is distributed according to the ranking of the politician within the political party, Mr. Speaker, so that the motive as well as the way of politician to preserve his or her political position by this policy is to eat the carpeting, so that politician is ranked upper in the rank in the parliament, not parliament, the political party, which is accountable to the authoritative figure. For example, when we talk about Japanese Liberal Democratic Party, politicians have no incentive whatsoever to be shown as accountable politician to the citizens, but be accountable and eat the carpeting to neither Abe, Ishiba, as well as Kowa, for example, which have in which they have a power to rank the politician, and then according to the ranking, because those sort of politician is gaining a seat on their side of the house, people can't necessarily have to become a politician who are obeying that sort of authoritative figure, no thank you, on their side of the house. What's the importance of the analysis? firstly, with this system, no thank you, the kind of assumption, side proposition is having, it destroyed on their side of the house. Because we contend, because people are accountable to the old figure as well as authoritative figure in which they are dictating the power inside the political party, then they do not necessarily reflecting the kind of need people would have, but people are aligned with the kind of ideology as well as the political stance in the authoritative figure this political party necessarily has. And we think this policy, so that the kind of accountability in which their side of the house can achieve and would achieve is accountability of the authoritative figure on their of the political figure, of the political authoritative figure of the political party. It seems counterintuitive, but when we analyze specifically of the structure of the kind of model, or the kind of institution which they have to defend, this polhan should exist. Therefore, this needs to corrupt the politics, because in order to be accountable to the authoritative figure, then they have to lead corruption, and they cannot accountable to the people's specific need. For example, even Abe Ishiba is not carrying female issue, LGBT issue, local problem, environmental problem, those sort of things. Then those sort of argument as well as the discourse is marginalized as well as disappeared on their side of the house. That's damaging when they want accountable to inclusive people as much as possible. Onyxon.
Okay, the reason why politicians suck up to prominent politicians in the current situation is they want support either through official support or financial contribution of political party funds in elections. If we get rid of the electoral system in an immediate democracy, there is no patron-client relationship between prominent politicians and politicians. So what's your problem?
No, that's good. So I have proven because of there's lack of elected system, there's no accountability as well as an incentive for people to necessarily cater to the interest of the people, which may be counterintuitive. That's necessarily true by this policy. So secondly about this was politicians' incentive to commit more negative campaign, for instance, to attract the people's impulse by taking this policy. The ways in which people can dictate and change the political situation is through clicking LDP button or other Minshudo button, those sort of Communist Party button, those sort of things in internet homepage, for example, in the Japanese diet. Ordinary people is not having necessarily a political active and definite political standpoint and agenda issue concern in which Ochiyama-san already explained. They are busy and they are not necessarily a political activist. But the implication of the political reality is that ordinary people is necessarily attracted to the kind of impulsive kind of political situation. For example, miso-yu problem and expensive curry eaten by Abe, those sort of things. And if political decisions can be made on that kind of impulse, then the kind of incentive of a politician to change the sort of things is through negative campaigning, which we would suggest is much easy option in order for them to become famous as well as to keep the political system. What we have proven from such closing opposition is maybe counterintuitive, but the exclusive harm by this kind of structure in this opposition.
Now I put up on government week.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we think it's extremely unstrategic for the closing opposition to totally neglect our partner's argument by saying just it's irrelevant. Because we think this is the most relevant argument in this debate. Why is that? Because we think that all the point of the democracy is to be reflected and citizens are able to control all your surroundings by themselves, not really the politicians. And we think the selection of agenda being done by the politicians is actually damaging this mechanism of citizens' autonomy. And we think it is a closing opposition should be regretful about that because they ignored this important argument. So as a government leader, I have three issues to talk about. Firstly, I talk about why stability is not really an important issue, which is an opening opposition issue. And I will talk about why rather the stability is going to be achieved under our paradigm because we think citizens are going to be more politically mature, which is also our extension. And secondly, I talk about analyze what is the ideal form of the democracy that we want to pursue and why this once in 4 years election is actually hindering this sort sort of ideal. And thirdly, I talk about why the indirect methods like lobbying is totally no, thank you. But for moving on, one independent rebuttal is the member of opposition. So the member of opposition came out here and said how this is going to be bad because there's going to be like some sort of more corruption or there's going to be like adhere more to the authoritative people in the party. But we think that's a problem of proportional representation system, and not really the problem of the immediate democracy in the first place, Mr. Speaker. Moreover, what we like to say is that corruption is rather going to be decreased under our paradigm. People adhering to authoritative people is going to be decreased. Why? Because, for example, the adhesion between bureaucrats and politicians are less likely to occur under our paradigm. Because the politicians who are dominate the majority, who are going to be the powerful in the parliament, changes time by time. That means that the connection between maybe the bureaucrats or the politicians are likely to be decreased. We've seen that the politicians can solely think about the citizens, and we think our paradigm have more transparency in the first place. So moving on to the first issue about the stability. So the main argument coming from the opening opposition was about how this is going to damage the measures like austerity or diplomacy. First, we don't think this is an important argument in the first place. Why? Because without analyzing what democracies actually should be, they just say stability is wrong. If the citizens don't really want austerity measure, we are fine with that. If citizens don't really want to engage with the United States and Japan, we're fine with that. Why? Because we think that all the decisions about the policies should be made by the citizens, not the politicians or higher beings. Why? Because citizens are the ones who are directly influenced by the policy. In the same way that I have my bodily autonomy, we think the citizens have the autonomy to control what is around yourself. We think that is a really not important argument. Even if that's the case, even if stability is important, it's going to be achieved under our paradigm. First, because we think that, citizens are not as stupid as the other side are characterized. For example, if you take the case, the case of Japan, a lot of people are concerned with the budget crisis that is occurring in the status quo. That was the reason why the government was able to actually increase the amount of consumption tax, which in short term it feels like it damages your economic capacity, but you really have this incentive to actually think about your own offspring or what is going to occur in the future. We think people have the incentive to think about those stuff. Therefore, we don't think that that sort of harm is going to occur. We'd rather think this booster is going to increase the political maturity, and we think this is rather going to increase the stability before moving up.
So do you support ancient Greece system of direct democracy that politicians are randomly elected from the people? Why do we have political parties and politicians in the first place? Your argumentations are opposing political parties in the first place.
Okay, we're not directly opposing political party, but we think if citizens think it's not unnecessary, we're more than happy to oppose that. So, okay, moving on to the issue of the political maturity. So opening opposition and closing opposition said how people are quite busy with their everyday life. They don't have the incentive to think about the political issues, or they talked about how these politicians will start to use visceral images or negative campaigns are likely to occur. But we don't think it's going to occur. Because in the status quo, the reason why the people sometimes misrepresent or choose the wrong politician, populistic politician, is because people don't monitor what the politicians are doing on a daily basis. People aren't really familiar with thinking about politics in every day. That's the reason why, for example, suddenly once in 4 years, election happens, and then people are like, oh yeah, election is there, but they rarely really think about those stuff. That's the reason why they're not really capable of thinking deeply. But after taking this poll, what will likely to happen? For example, they said how pressing buttons on the internet will happen. Well, that's something that is really wrong, because the political opinion polls are going to be collected on the streets or on the internet. We're going to see advertisements which encourage people to vote for someone else on a daily basis. The opportunity for the individual to actually be in contact with these issues or think about the political opportunities is going to be massively increased under our paradigm. Maybe there's going to be more conversation about the political issues inside families, or there's going to be more conversation about this in maybe school classrooms. We think people are going to be more politically mature, thinking about the stability, what is the necessary policy to be taken. Moving on to the second issue, what is the ideal form of democracy that we want to pursue? I think this is already explained in my introduction, but we think citizens should be the ultimate actor who decide what is necessary or not. And my partner and I already talked about this. But the status quo problem is the fact that actually the politicians are able to control what is necessary, what is not important, what is necessary or not. Why? Because we think election happens once in 4 years. This means that it's structurally impossible for the politicians to actually bring up all the agendas equally when the election happens. That means that, for example, and also when the election is going to be occurred is oftentimes decided by the prime minister. For example, our prime minister actually did election when he thought that, okay, my Abenomics is going well. That's why when he did this Abenomics. Or for example, Koizumi Seiken actually did the election for the privatization of the post office when he thought that majority of citizens will agree with that. But they never did this kind of election when, for example, the security security law issue happen in collective security action problem happens in Japan, because they know that they're going to lose this kind of thing. Why is this so bad? Because we think even if citizens feel like they're really against the agenda, although they are with the, for example, agenda of Abenomics, and not really with the agenda of, for example, agree with the policies of the diplomatic policies of Abe, they don't have this capacity to actually reflect those sort of voices. But moving on to the third issue, why is this going to occur under our patent? So why is the indirect method or whatsoever is going to fail? Because lobbying is only a privilege or prerogative given to the rich people who can win over the fair competition, like people who are NRA, or for example in Japan, like people like Nihon Ishikai. So even the normal people like me who don't really have the money or who don't really have the capacity to collect people aren't really able to reflect those voices. But under our patent, what is going to happen? Because the citizens have every day they have the opportunity to reflect their voices. So every time a new agenda is going to be brought up in the diet, if there's going to be an issue about the security, for example, law problem, that citizens are able to go against it and actually deny this kind of policy. Because every time the agenda is brought up to each individual agenda, citizens can reflect their own voices. So I think opening already explained about the time span and emergent problems, but we are the only one who explain the unique and inherent nature of the election, why the status quo framework failed. From all this is a very extreme crowd.
Thank you for remarks. Now I call upon opposition week.
First time in this grand final, not too scared of the traditions that you know. So, opening option talked about this policy's impact on society. Opening option brought you the impact on the system of democracy and the actual future of this policy. We think the government side rusty intent how this policy actually solves the problem within going to achieve anything at the goal. We told you how the politician's calculus changes. The calculus is not to appeal to the people for their vote, but to appeal to the leaders who decide the ranking of the roster at the whole. Because being on the third place of that roster is more important than being on, the 50th place of that roster at the whole. The people that decide that roster is obviously the people of the top of that party. So when the POI says that, so you're not related to them because you're not depending on the money with elections, things like that. That's totally different because the people on the top of that party are able to decide the structure of the party, dictate the position and value of the politicians, where the structuralization of conservatism or old lobby sort of incentives that are more related to the top of the party, like individuals, are more structuralized, and with stagnation, they wanted to uphold this house, is going to visualize this debate. I want to look at three things. Firstly, can their policy solve the insufficiencies that they identified as a problem? Secondly, is this policy a virtual democracy? Thirdly, what is the structure of the legislature? Before that, a couple of rebuttals. Firstly, just one independent rebuttal. So, Kumiko wanted to say that the problem is proportional system. Sorry, the education board said that they're going to have a proportional system to do whatsoever things that they're going to have on their side of the house. So that's probably not a justification to get away with that. It's not like they had a definition of alternative model, then that's the only thing we can think about it, which means that our problem obviously stands. So, first issue. So, Kowa want to talk about how dictatorial things happen and that's probably something bad. We don't get it. We think the status quo is not really perfect, but it does a fine job in identifying totally bad things. For example, to the extent that Democrat DPJ did a hugely bad job in its 2009 to 2012 range, we think that it obviously decisively lost that though. In the current election, we think that a dictatorship, sort of things, which is obviously bad, I don't know the content of it, would happen. We think that people, the current system is able to kick out such detrimental concerns. No, thank you. We think that in the current system, politicians are accountable to show agendas to the people that actually win the elections after all. Just buying votes with money or catering to some big corporations are insufficient to attract voters on the ground and get 80% or more support after all. So we don't get the analysis. But further we say that it's based on the analysis of how lobbying change things like that, which I'd like to examine in the second rebuttal. So thank you. So, which is about the opening garment. The opening garment want to talk about how there's a lack of accountability to voices. That there's things like gun restriction, there's things like Occupy Wall Street, things like that. I think the main problem is that it's about how lobbying is able to control that. And the only reason they said that lobbying will be solved is that you can't identify the people who do lobby. I don't get that, because you know who is on the top list of the roster at the top. NRA is able to identify the top people on the top of the roster. and actually lobby these people so that they can further structuralize that. And we said it's counterproductive, so they said that we proved to you that people on the top of the party are able to further influence people on the bottom of that party after all. That means that when these lobbies are able to further influence the entirety of that party, rather than independent partisan sort of politicians in that party being diminished on their side. And that's why we think that their policy sounded like it was going to solve something, but wasn't really able to solve that because politicians aren't really looking at people and how do things change. Do you have any answer?
Your reference to the Democratic Party of Japan's reign from 2009 and 2012 is an excellent example of our case. Why is it justifiable that the Japanese population had to put up with 3 consecutive cabinets with under 20% approval rating? Why is that justifiable under your model?
Because the thing is that, for the Democratic Party of Japan to be proven so detrimental, it had to take a couple of years to say it is consecutively bad. It's not like 4 years versus 1 day. So the comparative wouldn't be so detrimental after all. But we still were able to take down in 1 term after all, so that's probably not really a huge comparative. But more importantly, what I have to go on with it, that we do concede to the importance of it, of people standing on occupied streets as important. But the thing is that there are a lot of people, but what percentage was those people of the actual constituencies of the society? It's probably not up to 1% after all. Then how democracy has 100% of the people voting. How is that so influential to look at aware and standing people after all? Well, closing option analyzed was the actual influence of surrounding actors to make strategic interest in politics to influence the other 99% of society. But it totally incentive politicians to rather cater to negative campaigns. It's more obvious that Aso was totally a stupid person, Abe is a really stupid person, which made him sick and be kicked out in 2009, And obviously, we also these other things like the media, trying to be more accountable to immediacy rather than going on the catchy things, which means that sort of catchy, unaccountable, demeaning rhetorics about discussion will be on the top line of the discussion. That's when the actual content of the discussion that you want to have, like Occupy Wall Street, is going to be clouded out. The majority that's not really caring, but with fun discussion for the entertainment was like in focusing on that. That means that if you consider 2% of society being somewhat important, the rest of the 80% society is able to flush away that and with the accountability or solvency of the settlements, which means that they don't really solve anything. So let's go to the second idea about virtual democracy. They wanted to achieve representation. They wanted to have a mature democracy on their settlements, especially closing government. We say this representation is that, to the extent I've proven the first issue, where is that content of that representation? That principle needs an end to that. But what we further say is that, so when we told you that the discourse is distorted by negative campaigns or other things, particularly from closing option, where is the content of representation, where are you able to listen to people, sophisticate the idea for anything to happen? What we further say is that maturity, Fumiko, you know how research takes time, how discussion takes time. You can't take every day thinking about new things after all. You have your own life. Then, you're made to think about all those things as a mandatory framework. That is a slave of democracy or slave of the system. We don't live for democracy. Democracy is for us. Then I don't get the principle. Obvious. So that's where the principle comes. So last thing about the structure. This is where we were the only team to talk about the consequence of policy. The consequence that they were never able to engage and Fumiko neglected was the consequence where the people of the top are able to dominate the society or the political structure. We particularly told that the people at the top are most influential in lobbying and conservative ideas. That's where progression does not remain and people's grievances are unheard at all. It's important because especially in a two-party system like America, all these sort of politicians are going to be opting into the structure at all. So even if people are having dismayed that, they can politicians so desperately going to the top. These two parties are going to get all the seats after all. There is no counter party to be able to identify the corruption of these parties. So the structuralization, deterioration only remains. And that's where democracy does.